I guess I'll get started here. Let me go close the door. This is Tracing Your German Roots. This is the first time I've taught this class. So it might seem a little disjointed. Also, it might seem disjointed because the topic, and you'll understand a little later why that's also disjointed, just because of the nature of Germany. My name is David Laatsch, and I have German roots everywhere I look. I'm from the North, Midwest, lots of Germans there, lots of Germans in my background, even branches that I didn't think were German, tracing back far enough, they're German. Yes.
Are you going to use some kind of a microphone?
Okay, I can speak up a little. I can speak up a little.
Or take your mask off?
Y'all fine with me taking my mask off? I'm vaxxed. I'm vaccinated. So, okay. All right, I'll take my mask off then. All right, yes, it is difficult. Anyway, what I was saying was, yes, I have German, both mother and father's side, even people I didn't think were, somebody get the door, please. Even people who I didn't think were German, if I trace them back far enough, they turn out to be German. My mother's maiden name was Michael, and they always said they were Scottish, but actually they're Swiss. They just anglicized their name and then started telling people they were Scottish, but they're actually Swiss. Anyway, let's get started. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on here. Okay, so we're going to talk about 4 topics, basically. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of German migration to the United States, a little bit about Louisiana. We're going to talk about tracing your German ancestors in the United States, finding your immigrant's place of origin and the importance of that, and then deciphering and reading German records if you are fortunate enough to find them. Okay, so German immigration comes in 2 waves, basically. The first wave, the so-called first boat immigrants, came here before the Revolutionary War or shortly after. Yes, ma'am. Yes, yes, I'm recording this and I'll put it up later with the voiceover, yes. So even among the Jamestown colonists, there were some Germans. There were a couple, I can't remember, I think they were woodcutters. But yes, so the Germans have been part of the American landscape. Most of the German immigrants from before the war settled in the area around Philadelphia, eastern Pennsylvania, western Maryland, northern Virginia. You'll find a lot of pre-war Germans there. The so-called Pennsylvania Dutch settled there. And the reason for that is because the King of England at the time was also the Elector of Hanover. So he had a huge chunk of German. He was German. He spoke German. King George I was German. He spoke German. His children spoke German. He held court in German in England. And then he invited people from Hanover to come to the colonies, the English colonies, to help settle as well. So that's why these people were largely from Hanover and the Rhine Valley, because it was easy to get onto the Rhine River, go to Rotterdam, and then take a boat over. The Rhine runs right through between Germany and France. It's a very fast-moving river. It's navigable all the way. And also specific to Louisiana, we have the so-called German coast. Let me let this gentleman in. Which was established in the 1720s. And if you want to know more about that, we have this book right here, Germans of Louisiana. Is anybody familiar with this book? Have you read it? It's a great book. It's got a great history of German settlement, especially the early German settlement and all the horrible stuff they went through before they wound up around Harahan, there west of New Orleans. Disease, hurricanes, all kinds of horrible things, economic collapse. Y'all familiar with John Law, the Scottish economist in France? He started a trading company. The French wanted to have a trading company like the Dutch East India Company and the British West India Company. So they start the Mississippi Company with this guy named John Law. He sells a bunch of stock. The stock is inflated price. There's nothing behind it. And the stock collapses, a lot like the real estate market did in the US in 2008, just wiped out the French economy. But as part of that, he had moved a bunch of settlers over here to work on his land, basically, and help his company thrive. And then they got stuck here. So, and but that's all told in this book, Germans of Louisiana. Highly recommend. It also goes into, like, you know, cultural contributions and stuff too. But also many persecuted religious minorities. Pennsylvania had religious freedom. That's why they settled in Pennsylvania. I mean, you learn about the people who came over to settle Massachusetts because they wanted religious freedom. Well, part of the freedom they wanted was to persecute others. Pennsylvania did not have that. So the Amish, the Mennonites, German Baptists, other weird fringy religions start coming over and settling in Germany. Dunkers, whatever Dunkers are, I've never been able to figure that out. So that's before the war. Then, come on, don't do this to me. What happened? I'm going the wrong way. That's a little preview. Okay, the second boat immigrants, as they're called. The huge wave of German immigration in the 1800s. And the dates for that will vary. You'll see 1820 to 1900, 1820 to 1890, 1815 to 1914, whatever. You get the idea. Over 6 million Germans leave the territory we now call Germany, or German-speaking territories, and come to the United States. The peaks are in the 1860s and 1880s. Over 1 million people in each of those decades came over from Germany. Entire village is gone, just moved over here. Whole areas just completely cleaned out by immigration. A lot of them were political refugees because in the 1800s in Germany, there was a lot of unrest. There were uprisings and revolutions pretty much in some state or other constantly. So people just left to get away from that, or they were involved in them and being politically hunted. So they moved over here. So a lot of actually German radicals and stuff come over as well. And of course, there's the Homestead Act. The German government, a lot of German governments were trying to get rid of their more poor people. And so they tell them, hey, look, if you go out to the Midwest in the United States, they'll give you 160 acres of land. All you have to do is build a house and grow a crop, and you can get 40, 60, 160, however many acres, free. So that attracted a lot of people out as well. They also settled in large industrial cities. If you look at Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Chicago, all have huge German populations. And they settled like along the Ohio Valley, the Great Plains, around the Great Lakes, many, many of them. So as a result of that, and this number also varies, this is the low number I went with, 43% of Americans claim at least some German ancestry. And things I've read say, oh, the German ethnic group is the most assimilated ethnic group in America. Well, I think it kind of goes the other way too. America sort of assimilated itself to its German immigrants. We have Christmas trees, Santa Claus, Easter eggs, beer. All of those are things that were brought over by Germans that are just now part of American culture. So this a map, every county in yellow is a county where a German Americans are the largest reported ethnic group. And I think that's the 2000 census there. So as you can see, just a second there. As you can see, you know, it's called the German belt, but yeah, there's a large German influence all across the Midwest. You can in fact go from coast to coast and not leave a majority German county. So, but not so much in the South. For some reason, they didn't come south.
Some of them did come and land
Yes.
in New Orleans.
Mhm. Yeah, New Orleans has a significant German population. I mean, Alabama, what is it? Birmingham, Alabama has a significant German population, but they're apparently not the majority there. So. We're doing this again.
Power
Okay.
on.
Hi, I can hear you. Can you mind muting your microphone, please?
Bluetooth connected.
Okay. So, to trace your German ancestors, because so many Germans, so many Americans are German in the United States, for the most part, genealogy, German genealogy is just genealogy, basically. I mean, there are some tips and tricks and some differences, but to find your German ancestors, start with yourself. Go back generation by generation, not skipping a generation. I shouldn't have to tell you this, but I always need to remind people. Also, family lore is important. People tell stories. People know what happened. So talk to your older relatives. I should be doing that anyway. Also look for Bibles, letters, photographs, family papers, stuff that's in the bottom of trunks, shoe boxes in the attic, wherever your old stuff is. If you please mute your microphone. I always tell people to talk to the old people, especially when I'm teaching younger groups, because, and my story is, my grandfather died in 1997. And I just found out a couple of years ago that he went to high school with Charles Lindbergh. I didn't know that. I wish I could ask him about it. But yeah, too late. Also, and it's really important with this, is look for your fan club members. That is family members, associates, and neighbors. Germans moved in groups. Chain migration was very common with German immigration. They would send somebody over, that person would get established, find a job, figure out how to work the Homestead Act, and then send back home, and more people would come. I know this happened in my family. My Laatches came over about 15 years time. So, and the trick is to find that person in your line who was the first immigrant here. That's what you're looking for, at least on the American side. You're trying to find that person who migrated here. So, and you want to find their most precise place of origin, and the reason for that will become apparent in a few minutes. So, and I'll talk about how to do that here. So this is an example of family lore. This is my grandfather, the one I was just talking about. This is his baptismal record. As you can see, very elaborate, very kind of beautiful in its way. German churches especially, very fond of this sort of thing. If you can find them, that they are treasures in themselves, but it also has a bunch of really good genealogical information. This is the importance of family lore. Because there's his name at the top, Otto Heinrich Friedrich, child of, and there's his father, Friedrich Laatsch, and there's his mother, Marie, and then it gives her maiden name, Kolsch, or Kelsch, or Kulsch. Birth date, birthplace, Corning, Wisconsin, and then other information. The name of the church, you can't read it under that, but it says the Church of the Trinity, basically, in German. So using that, I went to the 1910 census, and there is Fred, Mary, there's Otto, 6 years old, exactly the right age. And then he's got 2 siblings there. He eventually had 7 more siblings, I think. Yeah, or Marie. And it also depends on who is taking the census. This census was done, if you look at the top of the page, at the various page, it has the name of the census taker. And this one I don't remember the person's name, but it's a pretty obviously not a German name. So they were writing down what they heard. Things to watch out for, as we were mentioning, spelling of names. Names are frequently recorded phonetically, especially when the census taker was not of German extraction or had no German. And we're talking, Marathon County was pretty much an entirely German-speaking county, and the census taker was not a German speaker. So you'll see names being recorded phonetically. Laatsch, for example, Laatsch. I've seen 6 or 7 different spellings. Stein sometimes become S-T-I-N-E instead of S-T-E-I-N. Yes, ma'am. Okay, down to the right. And then, of course, in Louisiana, Scheck-Snyder. There are 17 attested spellings of that name or something. It's wild. So.
Went from M-E-I-E-R in Germany to M-E-Y-E-R here.
Yeah. And some of that is because, you may as well, because of you're trying to fit in, or you're just tired of people mispronouncing your name. Some of it was because of the wars, and you're trying to anglicize a little bit. But anyway, so if you're looking for names and you can't find them, is everyone familiar with the Soundex system? Have you heard of it? Okay, it is an indexing system that's based on phonetics. And if you go to the archives.gov, or you just Google the word Soundex, there's a nice explanation. It's very simple. But it's a way to index names phonetically so that if you're trying to find the Laatches and the person has completely garbled the name, they at least got the consonants right, you hope. It's based on consonants. Or on Ancestry, you can click on, when you put in a name, you can click on Soundex and it will convert that to the Soundex and then search that as well. You'll get a lot of hits, very few having anything to do with what you want. But if you can narrow down like places a lot, you can, that'll work. So if you know where they are, but you can't find them, you can Soundex the name and maybe within a county or a state, find them on a census like that. But yeah, Soundex is a pretty good thing, especially for immigrants. And if the census taker was drunk or illiterate or name changes, particularly after 1917 and 1940, people begin to change their names or the spellings of their names to disguise the fact that they were German. In one case in my family, the Schoenbergers just dropped the C out of Schoenberger. I don't know how that was supposed to help. It still sounds horrifically German, but that's what they did. Anyway, Muellers become Millers, Schmidts can become Smiths. In this case, Schumachers became Shoemaker. This is 1870. And that was another English speaker writing that down. But yeah, that's my great grandparents, and Mary is my great grandmother. And then that's supposed to be Emil, but this person wrote it A-M-E-A-L, Emil. Yeah, so anyway. And yes, they were all in liquor sales in Pittsburgh. Also, another thing way to search for names, wildcard. Are we all familiar with the wildcard features on Ancestry and Family Search? Have you used those? Okay. If you're looking for a name and you think it might be garbled, misspelled, you can use a question mark to replace a single letter in a name. So if their name is supposed to be Mueller and you put in a question mark, you get Mueller, Miller, Maller, Meller, however the person heard it or recorded it. Or you can use an asterisk and it'll replace an entire group of letters. So if I put L-A asterisk C-H, Laatsch, Laatsch, Lardach, Laosh, Lange, Streich, so But if you don't know how it showed up, and another tactic I use is I put like, the first letter, asterisk, the last two letters, and then the first two letters, asterisk, last two letters, and then the first three letters, until I find something. So a lot of these, it takes patience, it takes ingenuity, it takes a little thinking outside the box. So why would you change your name? This is the famous Act 114, passed by the Louisiana legislature in 1918 at the end of World War I, prohibiting the teaching of German in schools, universities, any educational institution. Outlawed German, basically. There was another act passed the next year that outlawed public displays of German culture. 1918, 1919, the end of World War I. So you couldn't have Oompa bands or whatever. It was illegal to be. It was basically illegal to be German in Louisiana after 1918. The Supreme Court struck down those laws in 1922, but there was violent, rabid anti-German sentiment during the First World War. So if you remember how we treated the French when the Iraq War was kicking off in 2003, imagine that far worse. People kicked dachshunds. Germans were beaten up for speaking German in public. Frankfurters became hot dogs, so on and so on. Wiener Schnitzel became country fried steak. Yes.
Was that throughout the whole country or just some?
It was large. It was throughout the whole country. There were similar laws passed, like even in majority German states like Ohio and Indiana also had anti-German laws. I just chose this one because it's local. So anyway, back to my census search. I got Fred as my name, so I put him in, and here he is in 1880 at age 3, and there's his parents, Otto and Emily. Now, if I look farther to the right, this is what it looks like. It shows their place of origin. So Fred was born in Wisconsin, but his parents were both born in Prussia, which is now part of Germany. But so they're claiming Prussian. So those are my immigrants on that line, Otto and Emily. And they're from Prussia. So that's what I'm looking for, trying to find somebody who wasn't born here in the US. Now I've got something I can work. Now I'm going to try to go back to Germany. But how? Well, I want to find immigration records or when they got here. So I can find, I can make that link with the passenger list. So if I move them forward, so I've gone back to 1880 and found them. Now, if I move forward to the 1900, the 1910 census, one of the questions on that census was, are you a citizen? If not, are you naturalized? Do you have your papers, which is there? So he had filed, Otto had filed for naturalization. He was never naturalized. He died before he could be naturalized. Or are you an alien? So, and here he says he got here in 1870. So now I have, is he right? I don't know, but I know I have sort of a time to work with. So then I take that information, and here I found actually he immigrated in 1868, close enough. On Ancestry, you can do a thing where you move the years back and forth a little bit. So there we have a Karl Laatsch, a Carolina Laatsch, and there's my man Otto, my great-great-grandfather. And this one shows that they're from Prussia, which is helpful. Not as precise as I would like, but he's a shoemaker, Carl is, and then Otto lists himself as a mason. He was 17, so I don't know if he was, or if that was just something he said. So what you really want to do is get as precise as you can with the town of origin if you want to get back to Germany. And one way to do that, a lot of passenger lists, if you can, especially if you can find the departure list, will list a town. The incoming list, when they showed up here, they would get on the boat and they would write down everybody's name and information that got on the boat in Germany or wherever. And then they would hand that off to the American authorities who would then copy it out, but maybe not copy out the same information. So the German departure lists will often have very precise information. If you can find those, great. The incoming lists will at least list a region for the most part. Sometimes they would just write Bavaria and then just draw a line whether they were from Bavaria or not, didn't care. Yeah. If you can find immigration records, naturalization records, first papers where they filed to say they were wanted to naturalize, sometimes those will list places of origin, sometimes not. I've also found some of them, if you can find a newspaper obituary, those will sometimes list where the person was born. And then there's always just dumb luck. Just put it in Ancestry and see what happens. That has also worked for me. But as I can't remember which philosopher said that luck favors those who are prepared for it. So, you know, the more research you can do, the better chance you have of just having some dumb luck. So, dumb luck. I put in Otto's name and his birth year, 1851. And then I put in Prussia. And I found this record. There is Karl Laatsch. There's Caroline Laatsch, listed as her maiden name, by the way. Uh-oh. And then there's Hermann Karl Otto, so that's his birth name. Born in the town of Belkov, which is on a tiny island way up in the Baltic. And then we have a birth date, 25th of May, no, 23rd of May. You can sort of make that out there. And
What is that record?
hmm?
What is that record?
That's his birth record from a church book. Yeah. Yeah. So that's his birth record, shows his parents. So now I've got them back. I know where he's from. And yeah, I've got a town. Or at least a region. Because these two moved, I found out later, moved to Belkov, probably to avoid scandal. She's his half aunt. His father and her grandfather are the same person. Yeah. That'll be explained a little later. You'll see. Yes. So it was a small town. Or here, I was talking about obituaries. Here is Mary Kelsch's father, Mary, my great-grandmother. That's her father. Died in Tuesday morning in the town in Ripley. And he was born in Osterberg, Germany on April 2, 1852. He came to this country in 1870. Well, I found a Hamburg departure list from March of 1870. And there is Heinrich Kelsch. And it says he's from Petersmark, not Osterberg. Well, I looked them up. They're about 2 miles apart. Pretty sure that's the same guy. And it shows that he's a farmer, 18 years old, 1870, 1852, 1870, it all lines up. So I was not able, with the resources I have here, to get any farther back than that. So I've got him getting on a boat in March of 1870. That's the first earliest I can find him. And for a lot of people, come on, don't do this to me. In most cases, and in a lot of cases, your immigrant will be as far as you're able to go. If you can find out who they are and where they're from, that may be it, just because records are gone. They're not available right now. So if you're going to do German genealogy, you have to know where they're from as precisely as you can. Prussia is not good enough. For the most part, I got lucky. Germany was not a unified country until 1870. And even then, unified. Before that, there was a patchwork over 1,000 semi-autonomous units that came. It was pretty much looked like a feudal state. Countries came in and went out of existence. Borders shifted. Governments changed. They started alliances and wars amongst themselves. It was a mess. So there were there are large kingdoms like Prussia, Bavaria. There were smaller principalities like Hesse-Kassel. And then there's city-states. Hamburg was, had its own country, so on and so on. So they were loosely grouped under the name the Holy Roman Empire up until the early 1800s and ruled by the Habsburg dynasty. We're all familiar with the Habsburgs, right? Okay. The Holy Roman Empire, as Napoleon said, is none of the above. So it's neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. But anyway. And the Habsburgs were more like the nominal rulers. He was the emperor of Germany, and he was elected by certain people. But did he really have a lot of power in some of the places? Not really, no. So anyway, this is what Germany looked like, just the western part of Germany in 1789. So this gives you an idea of just how confused and confusing things can be. If you look here where it says Hesse-Kassel, it's all this brown, but then there's some down here, there's some up there. It's not contiguous. So it's just not like what the family owned, what states they had, what they got in as they were making alliances, et cetera, et cetera. So as you can see, it's a confused mess. This is why you have to know exactly where you're from. And then after Napoleon got through, things got a little more rational, but we still have a large group of separate countries. And right in the middle there, that's a big mess. Which leads to, this is the town of Karnitz, which is where Karl and Caroline were originally from. That's the town they left. And if you pull out, you'll see it's not in Germany anymore, it's in Poland. That part of Poland was Pomerania. It was part of Germany until 1945, when, as punishment for the war, a huge chunk of Germany was sliced off and given to Poland. So now my German records are all in Poland, if they still exist. During the war, the Germans tried to save a lot of records and move them. So the records from that town did survive, but a lot of them did not, or the Polish destroyed them, hid them, burned them. They got destroyed in the war. Okay, trivia question. Just to show how complicated things can be. In what year did Germany, as we know it, come into being? Anyone? Modern state of Germany, with its modern borders and its current government. 1990. Before that, there was East and West Germany. Before that, the Weimar Republic, et cetera, et cetera. So Germany, as we know it, is a very, very fresh idea. So German records are patchy. This is mostly about, this presentation mostly how hard it is to do German, how hard it is to do German genealogy. Once you do find stuff, it's great. And you just have to dig and dig and dig. German records are patchy. Germany has seen a lot of destructive wars. The 30 Years' War, for example, if you get back to the 1650s, you're doing well. But you're probably not going to get past beyond that, because the 30 Years' War pretty much wiped out huge sections of Germany. It was a religious war. So the Protestants would attack a town and then they would burn the Catholic Church. And then the Catholics would attack the town and they'd burn the Protestant church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And some regions in Germany, especially in the plains, up the northern plains of Germany, lost 80% of population through famine, violence, disease, or they just fled. And then the Second World War, Germany was pretty much bombed to rubble. So a lot of records were destroyed. Just older records were destroyed just because they happened to be in the church when it got hit by a bomb. Or, they hid the records, somebody hid the records and then that person died or was just relocated and nobody knows where the records are now. Probably in somebody's basement or attic. They're still finding stuff. I mean, there was a man who died a few years ago and they found a bunch of art in his house that had been taken from Jews in France. So, I mean.
There's a guy that had the tank in his basement too.
Had what?
A tank.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you'll
They
find.
took it away from me.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, records are still popping up. So that were hidden during the war. So another problem you're going to run into is that god-awful German handwriting. Has anyone had a chance to look at German handwriting? The two principal systems are, if you can just type your comments in the comment box, I'll get to them when we're done, please. Current, and then that was later replaced by the Sutherland script in the early 1900s. This is what current looks like. You will notice A, C, E, I, M, N, R, V, U, all look remarkably similar to each other. It was designed so that somebody who was dipping a pen could write as much as he could without lifting the pen. Also, if you look, F, H, S, and even J all look very similar to one another. The lowercase ones especially, and that's if somebody's writing carefully. If they're not writing carefully, you get that. So yes, German can be difficult to read. I recommend, and I will send these out. I will email out some paperwork after this showing you with examples like that chart and some words to look out for and stuff.
On the headstones, they just kept writing. They
Mhm.
didn't have periods or changing. It just went on and you had to figure out what it is.
Well, German kind of does that too. Just they're masters of sentences that go 2 or 3 pages. That's just the way the language works. German doesn't have word order. Like English is very strict word order. Subject, verb, predicate, subject, verb, predicate. German doesn't do that. Because of the way the language works, you can put the words in pretty much any order you want. So that can also make things a little more difficult to read. But yeah, that's what current looks like, when the guy's been writing all day and he's tired, doesn't care, doesn't have good handwriting to begin with. The Sutherland script is a little better. I don't have any examples of it. They sort of rationalized it a little, but not much.
When did that come in?
About 1911. And you'll mostly see that if you have like letters and stuff like that. By 1911, Germany was using typewriters for their records. So you won't run into Sutherland that often. But you will, if you're looking at newspapers, come across their famous typeface called Fraktur. And you've all seen this, right? And once again, they have just a maddening need to use weird letter forms. Let's see, where's the Q? Oh, Q's not too bad. But I and J look the same. F and S look very similar, and so on. They use that medial S, that long S. So you have Thomas Jefferson, and those old, yeah. So sources, what you're going to be looking for once you've located your person and know where they're from, the best place to start looking is in church records. Germany didn't have civil registration until 1876. Before that, a large part of the record keeping fell to the local churches. So you would need to know what religion they practiced. Were they Lutheran, which is sometimes called evangelical Lutheran, Were they Catholic? Or were they straight evangelical Calvinists, which was a Calvinist church? And they all had their own individual records. And then in a lot of places, the records would, the preacher, the priest, whatever, at the end of the year would copy out the records and hand them off to the civil authority. And what's called a Kirchenbuchduplikat. So, and you'll see those. So that was the main record keeping: birth, marriage, death, all of that was done at the church and then handed off to the civil authority. Civil records became wide in all of Germany after 1876. That's when they started keeping civil registration, where you were, and if you're familiar with European records, every time somebody was born, got married, died, somebody would have to go to the city hall and find like the record department and say, okay, on such and such a date at such and such a time, such and such a thing happened. But in some places earlier, as early as 1815, they were keeping civil registration, especially in places that Napoleon had taken over, because they learned the practice from the French. Because Napoleon wanted to keep track of as many people as he could, because he wanted to be able to draft them into his armies. He wanted to know how many workers he had. He wanted to know how much food he could produce, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Civil records are easier to read because they always follow a formula. So once you find one, you figure out what the formula is, then you know this name here is the father, this name here is the mother, this name here is the child, these are the witnesses, and so on and so on. Civil records also use printed forms, and like I said, they're very formulaic. So if you can find those, great. And here's an example from the city of Cologne in 1832, from what I can make out up there. So Cologne was using civil registration in the 1830s. And as you can see, it's got a nice printed form. So all the record keeper had to do was fill in the blanks. So it follows a very neat formula. And once you figure out what that formula is, you don't really have to know a lot of German to read German records. You have to be able to identify keywords: mother, father, son, daughter, birth, death. And I'm going to send these out. I'll email you all these, like a nice little word list: birth, death, baptism, witness. And once you get that, you can sort of figure out what's going on in the record. You don't really have to read German like a pro to read foreign records once you know. So don't be intimidated is what I'm getting at. Just put in a little work, you can figure it out. So my tips: 1, be patient. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to be very frustrating. Have a printout of the handwriting or typeface that you're reading in front of you. So if you're reading current, have a printout of what the current is and what the letters are. I also recommend having Google Translate open on your computer. Because one of the things I did was, like, I would see these letters, I think, oh, this looks like a letter combination. I would type that in, nothing. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's this letter. I type that in, and finally I get a hit that makes sense. Because if you type in a weird letter and you're like, pasture. Or if you type in another letter and it's like, oh, daughter, got it. Yeah. First thing I do is recommend going through the record and write out any names you see. And as like I saw in that earlier record, and I'll show you that record again, the names are written in larger handwriting and in a different script, so they're easy to read. Don't go word by word. Are you familiar? You know that whole, you've taken tests, right? Where they tell you do the easy questions first and go back and do the hard questions. I recommend doing that with German, right? If you find a word, write out the words that you can identify, and then go back and try to figure out the words you can't. So if you can identify words, that will give you context and let you know what's going on. And then you can sometimes use that to figure out what you don't know. Also, I know a person who's German. If you know somebody who reads and writes German, maybe, make friends. So let's go back to this old record. So this is the birth record of Gottlieb Laatsch. And I know this was in 1790. I didn't put that in there, but I know this is 1790. So what do we see here? We see some names. Maria Wegners. Here is Joachim Laatsch. David Laatsch. And Peter Rumtu. So what can we guess just from that? What do we, there's one woman, right? So it's a birth record. So if there's only one woman mentioned, probably mother, yes. And there is the word Mutter. Okay, so I know the name of the mother. Now I have a problem because I have two Laatches. And I have to figure out who's the father. So I went through, so I Mutter Maria Wegners, and there is the word. That's a V, A-T-E-R, that's father. I know because I have my, this took me 4 hours, by the way. What I'm going through here took me 4 hours. I wound up like taking my finger and tracing the strokes and being like, okay, that's got to be an E.
Is that who you're named after?
Oh no, this is 5 generations ago.
Oh.
That's coincidence. I'm named after the king of Israel.
Okay.
That's just coincidence. So, like I said, German doesn't put anything in the right order. So I was able to see that, let me see here. Oh, there's the word, that's S-O-H-N, that's son. And so I was able to figure out eventually the father is the son of Joachim Laatsch. That's a farmer, Bowerman. That's a B. Oh, okay. And he is a musketeer in the local regiment, and his name is David Laatsch. So David Laatsch is the father. And then he's the witness to the baptism. And then I have, he was born on the 21st of October and baptized on the 22nd. And this is the one that gave me fits, because I know that was G-E-B-O-R-E-N, born, but I couldn't figure out what that was for the longest time. This is where my German friend came in. She pointed out, oh, that's unehelich, unmarried. So Gottlieb Laatsch, illegitimate child. His mother is Maria Wegners, and his father is the son of Joachim Laatsch, named David Laatsch, musketeer. So there we go. So Gottlieb grows up. He's born in 1790. He gets married in 1810 and has a daughter named Caroline. Meanwhile, David gets married and has a bunch of kids. The youngest is a boy named Carl, who's born in 1812. So that's how come Carl and Caroline, that explains that half amp, that bit of inbreeding there. So anyway, that's all I have. That's a German record. I seriously bring them in. I can help to the best of my knowledge and ability.
Did they know they were related?
Yes. I think that's why they left that village of Karnitz and moved. So.
Sites that we go to, are they free sites?
Yes. I'm going to send out a bunch of links and stuff after this. But there's a really good one. Family Search has a wiki. Is everyone familiar with the Family Search wiki? Has anyone looked at the Family Search wiki? It is a genealogy wiki. They have them for everywhere. What records are available, how to search those records, where to find those records, how to read the records, everything. Yeah. So
What is the wiki?
Like Wikipedia, if you're familiar with Wikipedia, it's it's an online encyclopedia basically. That's kept up by the people at Family Search keep it up. WIKI. I'm going to send you the link in your email. Wiki is, I think it's from the Hawaiian word for quick, I think, or easy. It's one of those. That's where they got the word. Anyway, so yeah, if you have trouble reading a thing, bring it to us. We probably may not be able to help you because the handwriting is so obnoxious. But you know, I do German records. I also do Dutch records if you have Dutch records. John does Italian if you have Italians in your family. But we are located right across the room over there, right across the library in the Special Collections Department.
Did you contact German resources in Germany for any of your records that you obtained?
I have not. I've done all that on Family Search and Ancestry. Yeah. So I could, I guess, go to Petersmark and try to look for the Kelsches. I have a hard time getting that. Hey, let's go to Germany, honey. I'm going to spend my time in this dusty old church in this small town in the middle of nowhere. Have fun. Anyway, our phone number is 225-231-3751, and you can email us. It's very easy to remember. Genealogy@ebrpl.com. East Baton Rouge Parish Library.com. EBRPL. That's our email. Yes, ma'am.
The Mormon Church has, the Mormon Library has gone and photographed all the church records that they can find. So if you happen to know, trace back to a certain specific town or area, you know, that you might be able to actually look at the church records from that particular town.
Yes. Yes. It's not always easy to find. Family Search especially, I've had difficulty finding local records on there for Germany. But yeah, there's a bunch of them there. Ancestry has a lot of them. At least Ancestry has the advantage that you can search. Not all the records on Family Search you can search by name. Sometimes you have to find the microfilm that they've scanned in and just go through frame by frame by frame by frame till you find what you're looking for. Takes time. Be patient. But if you can find your German ancestors, you know, if you already can locate them in Germany, you're doing really well, is what I'm getting at. And if you can get back from that, and that Laatsch line is the only line I've been able to trace back once I get to Germany. So out of 8 that I've gotten back to Germany so far. So yes, ma'am.
If you can find the local American church that has kept good records.
Yes.
They're a German, for example, a German Lutheran church. They grew up with this kind of keeping this good record.
Yeah.
And when we went to a record, we found the person's name, all the children's names, all his brothers and sisters' names, what he died from, where he had come from. And so if you have the luck of finding a church that kept this kind of record, it's, you really gain a lot of information.
Yeah, I found in Maryland, there's some good church records in Maryland in German that I found. Once again, they petered out about 1800, the ones I found. But yeah. I have some Germans who settled in those, came with the first boat, Pennsylvania Dutch, Western Maryland, that region. And then, yeah, I'm more interested in, for some reason, in the ones that came later, just because work has been done on them. So that's like my field. I'm doing the new work. Questions? Comments? I hope you all learned something today. I hope at least I was entertaining. All right.